This topic we're going to cover is to do with one of the barriers that large businesses face when it comes to doing barter, especially through BarterPay, and that is the concept of price versus cost. We'll show kind of a small business example, sort of where the selling and buying decision is made by one or two decision makers who are working together and can come up with the best overall decision, versus sort of the large businesses where the selling and buying negotiation and decisions are split between different departments and different decision makers, and seeing how that impacts things. Before we get into the kind of nuts and bolts of price versus cost, one thing to acknowledge that I think obviously we don't have every business in the world on BarterPay, although we would love to someday be able to say that we did. That's obviously not a realistic target. So we likely will not always have the lowest price vendor on board. Also, there is a strong possibility that someone will sharpen their pencil a little bit more for Canadian dollars versus BarterPay, because there are things that you cannot barter for, like your mortgage or fuel or taxes and all those types of things that you do need Canadian dollars for. And so if somebody is in a place where they need some cash to pay for those things, that they may sharpen their pencil a little bit more, especially in sort of the construction side of things, or even potentially in advertising as well. So being aware that we're not always going to have the lowest price. There are definitely times it does happen that the barter person is both the lowest price and also the lowest cost, but we have to kind of do an analysis when we're looking at whether or not the vendor who's willing to accept barter is the best option from a mathematical standpoint of doing the transaction. So looking at a general example, let's take a restaurant who has a 37.05% cost of goods, which is right around where restaurants would normally be. And then you have the BarterPay fees, which are 12.95%. And so we need to evaluate a purchase decision to renovate the bathrooms. So after filtering down to just contractors you trust, so all these quotes are from contractors that you trust, that you get one for $20,000, one for $22,000, one for $25,000, and those are all in Canadian dollars. And then you have another quote from a contractor who's willing to accept a portion of their quote in trade dollars. So they have a $23,000 quote, of which $10,000 is payable in trade. When you're looking at that sort of analysis, traditional methodology would be, okay, well, if I'm happy with any one of these four vendors, one of them is $20,000 and the other ones are more than that, I will go with the guy who's $20,000, all else being equal. When you introduce trade dollars as part of the component, you've removed that last phrase, which just says all else being equal. So now we have to kind of do an analysis of the $10,000 that is being accepted in trade dollars on this particular transaction. So when we look at that, so we have the quotes, we need to convert the $23,000, of which some isn't payable in trade, into a cash cost of the quote. So if we convert it, we have a $13,000, which is actually in Canadian dollars payable to that contractor. We then have to look at the $10,000 payable in trade dollars and say, okay, well, what is our cash cost to earn back that trade? Well, in terms of the food and beverage costs, or the kind of the cost of goods for the restaurant, the incremental cost of goods sold, because obviously they've got many costs involved in terms of salaries and heat and hydro things, but just the actual cost to service that additional business, because you wouldn't have to change too much in a restaurant to if someone sent you $10,000 more of business in terms of the fixed costs. Would be 37.5% or 37.05% in my example that I've got here. And then our fees are 12.95%. So the $10,000 would convert into $3,700 approximately of food cost and approximately $1,300 worth of fees to BarterPay. Those two numbers together are $5,000. So now we've got a total of $13,000 plus $5,000 equals $18,000. So now you're comparing a apples to apples on a currency basis. So you're comparing $20,000 to $18,000. So $18,000 is obviously a lower number than $20,000, and so a business owner or manager thinking rationally can see that the net benefit is that they will increase their net profit by $2,000 by following through on the barter transaction, even though it looks like they're spending $3,000 more on that particular expense than they would have the option to by picking the $20,000 quote. Obviously, there are lots of reasons to barter that are outside of just the strict math in terms of the network you're building, the kind of the camaraderie between different business owners, and the kind of the consulting and other things that can happen as a result of bartering. And so even if the barter number wasn't a lot better, there's other reasons to do it. In my example, obviously, there is a financial reason to do it beyond sort of the barter, other barter benefits. Now, if we want to look at that same example in sort of a multi-department environment, even though the same math is true and that choosing the $23,000 quote with $10,000 in trade was going to save the company or the business $2,000 to the bottom line, to the individual departments, if the barter advantage isn't kind of spread properly through the allocation in accounting, the purchasing department can't choose the barter option unless it's also the lowest price. But we already said at the very beginning that in most cases we aren't the lowest price, or we can't provide the lowest price quote. And so if you're not able to analyze it and allocate the barter advantage to the right departments, then it'll be very difficult to operate within BarterPay. And we'll go through kind of what the exact, or some of the ways that you can allocate the barter advantage, as I'm calling it here, out to the various departments. And I'll do that in a simple accounting software so that you can see that it's, if it can be done in a simple software, it can be done in a more complex one, probably in a more structured and easy fashion. So anyway, so they would be being hit by the $23,000 cost, which is $3,000 more expensive, and they'd get no credit for the $10,000 in additional business being brought through the barter method, and therefore they would decide to go with the $20,000. That $10,000 in new business is simply just lost. So assuming that you've kind of tracked with me so far in the price versus cost, and that there is an advantage even if the price is higher on the barter quote, then let's continue moving forward. If for some reason I've kind of lost you at this point, either through not the best example or an example that was exactly attributable to what you're doing, then feel free to contact your broker and discuss price versus cost, because it is a very important concept for all clients to understand in order to properly trade within the system and maximize their benefit from bartering.